In this video, I'm going to paint a classic Space Marine Captain miniature, to go with the other Imperial fists I've been working on this year. So stay tuned for some painting, some history, some retro rules discussion, and of course, a song at the end. I'm Matthew, welcome to Miniscape. Before I begin proper, if you're a fan of retro Warhammer stuff, then do check out my Instagram. One of the many projects I've been doing this year is to assemble a small force of Imperial fists, a supremacy force if you like. I've made 3 videos on these so far, covering bikes, Terminators, and tactical marines. And if you're thinking, I've seen this combination before, you could very well be mistaken, but more on that in another video. But I guess the critical thing that my force is lacking is a commander, and a captain miniature with sculpted fist icons here and there is a good shout in my opinion. Assembly of this model was simple since it only came in 2 pieces, model and backpack. Historical photos often show this wearing the sculpted cloak backpack that came with many different Space Marine captains, but I'm using the plastic banner backpack because I want him to have a banner. For context, the model that I am using is a variation on an earlier model released in 1991, namely the Space Marine Captain with Terminator honours. I painted one of these as an Ultramarines recently. You can see it on my Instagram page. I have another that was gifted to me by my buddy Benjamin from France, but I'm yet to decide how to paint that. The model I'm painting in this video was gifted to me by my friend David, and was released as part of the Imperial Fist Supremacy Force, released in August 1998, for only £65, just before 3rd edition 40k was released.
Hello. I'd like to order an Imperial Fist Supremacy Force, please, for £65.
Not again, you've got the wrong number, sir.
It is £65, I can see it in the magazine in front of me.
No, I mean the wrong phone number.
Oh, then, do you sell Legion of the Damned? There's a squad of, for £25 I would like.
Actually, I do have one.
You do?
But they cost £50, not £25. Rare item, you see.
Oh, I suppose I can stretch my budget to that.
Can you send the money via PayPal, though?
Oh, of course. Hang on, I'll just get a pen.
Good. Send it to AYB71UI5CX@gmail.
Wait, are you a scam caller?
Me? A scam caller? You're the loser who keeps calling me. £50 would be minimum compensation for the hassle you give me.
Now listen. £50's not too bad, actually.
He's different in the sense that a symbol in the middle of his chest is a fist rather than a gem. He also has a fist sculpted onto his knee pad and his shoulder pad, but otherwise the model is the same as the 1991 release. Starting from a white prime, I mixed some Vallejo orange red with water in about a 50-50 mix and apply this all over the miniature, taking special care to ensure that the orange red goes into the deepest recesses of the model. I suppose this is the pre-shading stage. When that was dry, I checked all over to make sure that there weren't any recesses that lacked the orange red, and if I wanted some shadows to be deeper, I painted some more of that mix in there. The next stage uses Vallejo dark sand, and using a battered old brush, I dry brushed this across the whole model, with the aim of all of the flat areas and raised parts catching this lighter colour. However, the results after the first pass is quite chalky, so I mix the dark sand on my palette with a little water and use my size 0 brush to apply this to all of the large flat and curved areas, taking special care to ensure none of it seeps into the recesses and ruins that orange shadow from before. With the dark sand still on my palette, I add some white paint, mix it in well, and paint this onto the most upper-facing parts of the model. And with that done, thus ends the pre-highlighting stage of the paint job. You'll notice that the base already has some sand on it. I glued this on earlier with some Mod Podge, only because that was closer to hand than my PVA glue, and when that was dry, I gave the whole thing a coat with Mod Podge diluted with water to seal the whole thing in. The next part was to paint the whole armour with Citadel Contrast Imperial Fist. However, I didn't slap it all on willy-nilly, like some sort of barbarian. I focused on all the areas except those that had been shaded. It's interesting using this paint because the result leaves a glossy finish, but that's fine. A matte varnish at the end will solve that problem. I wanted to brighten up the yellow in places. My solution to this was the same method I used for my Tactical Marines and Terminators, and that is to mix Citadel Flash Kits yellow with some flow improver in about a 50-50 mix. According to the bottle, flow improver maintains no colour shift from wet to dry. It increases flow, maintains stability, slows drying, etc, etc. Suffice to say, I quite like using it when glazing, which is what I wanted to do here. As you can see, I focused on applying this to the upper facing areas. After the first pass was dry, I went in again, covering slightly less area than before and focusing on the same general location. Again, I avoided the recesses because I didn't want to spoil the warm orange shade I had achieved. I'm not quite done with the yellow armour yet, but I wanted to block in the black areas such as the bolt gun, the pipes, the fist icons, and his pistol holster. Now you'll notice the paint doesn't seep into the depths of the recesses. That's because I usually overbrush the raised areas and then use thinned paint to fill the recesses when the first coat is dry. But either stage could be done first. I try to be very careful with my brush strokes when using thinned black paint, since it is prone to splattering over the yellow base coat, which can be a pain to fix. The Flash Kit's yellow from before was still moist on my palette, so I added a drop of white, mixed it in, and used this to edge highlight all over the armour using my 000 brush. For the red areas, I used Vallejo Dark Vermilion, which is almost the same colour as Citadel Evil Sun Scarlet. This goes on the pauldron edges, the wax seal on the bolter, and the chest as well. Interestingly, everyone I've spoken to who owns this model has said that there's a miscast on the chest. Apparently, this was because this model was made by sculpting some fist icons right on top of the original metal model from 1991. This was then recast, and there was an issue with that process. It might be true, it might be an urban legend. If anyone knows for sure, do let me know in the comments. I returned to the bolter and the other black areas, and roughly highlighted those with Wolf Grey by Warpaint's Fanatic. Then I mixed this with some white, and painted some finer edge highlights, and picked out the sharpest edges. Off camera, I used some thin black paint to blackline the recesses in the pipes, i.e. to correct any areas where I might have gone into the recesses with the grey. I fancied doing some metallics, so as always I used Gunmetal by Army Painter. I painted this on the bolt gun magazine, and the barrel, and some of the other places. You might be wondering where the backpack is. Don't worry, it's here. I'll be sticking it on later. It's funny because I've really only used 4 main colours on this model so far, but I still think it's cool. Time to highlight the red, and I'm using Citadel Trollslayer Orange, and again my 000 brush, just running it along the edges at 45 degrees. On his chest, I'm just painting the end half of these feathers with a line of Trollslayer Orange. And if I do this carefully, then it should mask the casting error inherent in this model. I then mixed the Trollslayer Orange with a dot of white and applied this to the sharpest edges, wherever there was some red, just to pick out those juicy details. I did most of this off camera, but here are the results. Using tan earth, I base coat the purity seals to give them that look of worn parchment. I then highlight them with a mixture of tan earth and white. And here he is at this stage. It's getting there for sure. Some thinned black paint in tiny quantities is carefully applied to the purity seals. The irony of praying that I didn't screw this up whilst simulating these little prayers on the purity seals was not lost on me. A glance at the booklet that came with the Supremacy Force says the captain's name is Dire, which I painted on his name tag here. Now move aside, gunmetal, while a treasured relic takes over. This pot of mithril silver was the first metallic paint I bought in 1995, and it's still fluid, still vibrant. I used this to highlight the metallics on the bolt gun. And I will admit, I got a little goosebumpy putting this on. Ooh! As far as I can see, the first inclusion of this Space Marine Captain sculpt is in White Dwarf 133 from January 1991. Designed by Jez Goodwin, it's one of 6 captains released at the time. There's a chapter-specific one each for Ultramarines, Dark Angels, Blood Angels, and Space Wolves. But our man with the Power Fist and Bolt Gun is described as having Terminator honours. As you can see, each of these captains came with the classic sculpted cloak backpack. This model is clearly wearing Mark 7 power armour. It goes well with the Space Marine Strike Force set released in the previous year. And this is best shown in some of the Golden Demon entries featured later in that year, in August 1991. In fact, it's interesting to see how often this particular sculpt crops up in White Dwarf magazines in the early 90s. For instance, here he is as part of a command group from an unnamed Space Marine chapter invented by Adrian Wild. Here he is again, sporting Ultramarine colours. A photo in the White Dwarf for February 1992 shows him painted in Dark Angel's colours in this beautiful diorama. In April 92, there's an heavy metal article featuring the beautiful work of Adrian Wild. This is the second one he painted, but with different colours this time. He must have really liked this miniature. This distinctive and gorgeous Golden Demon entry by Barry Lees was featured in July 1992, issue 151. While in the following year, this model is shown again, this time with banners, and painted by Nick Simerson. The bolt gun has been replaced by a flamer, which is of course totally legitimate, since even in 2nd edition, the profile for Space Marine captains said they could take special weapons, i.e. flamers, plasma guns, and melter guns. Actually, in this context, bolt guns were also considered special weapons. In 2nd edition Warhammer 40k, Codex Angels of Death and Codex Ultramarines state that your army must be led by a Space Marine captain, unless you choose for it to be led by one of the special characters. Either regular Space Marine captains, or Space Marine captains in Terminator armour could be used to lead your army, unless you and your opponent were using the additional rules from White Dwarf magazine number 209, which allowed a smaller army, say 500 points, to be led by another Space Marine hero such as a chaplain or librarian. A Space Marine captain costs 96 points, coming with a bolt pistol and frag grenades. He wears power armour, and may have up to 3 war gear cards, and additional equipment chosen from the armour, assault weapons, special weapons, and grenades section of the war gear lists. He can ride a bike, at the cost of 20 points. If he is the army commander, he has a strategy rating of 5, which is typical for Space Marines. The special rules allow any Space Marine units within 12 inches of him to use his leadership value when taking a leadership test, which is really useful since his leadership value is the big 1-0. Note that this is just the case for the Ultramarines and Blood Angels army lists. The Dark Angels lists has an entry for a Dark Angels master instead. I don't want to delve into the rules too deeply for him at this stage because I might want to make a video about it at some point in the future. I suppose I might do the same for Space Wolves at some point, but I wouldn't hold your breath, because my bushy tail doesn't wag that way. One thing I found in the Ultramarines Codex while flicking at random is this page with banners just asking to be photocopied or scanned. No, it doesn't say anything about permissions being granted for that, but shh, they'll never know. Interestingly, the Imperial Fists get their own colour page in the Ultramarines Codex, which is more than any of the other Codex chapters get. The lack of a larger coverage of Imperial Fists is probably surprising, but in the mid-90s, official Games Workshop photographs were heavily skewed towards the big 4 Space Marine chapters: Dark Angels, Space Wolves, Blood Angels and Ultramarines. Nevertheless, the creation of one's own chapter was definitely encouraged at the time. There's evidence in the Codex to support that, but while I'm on this subject, I'd like to return to White Dwarf 209 and talk about the supplementary rules for a Space Marine chapter master. See, if you collected one of the big 4, then you had the rules for your head honcho, but if you collected your own chapter, or one that was less well known, these rules allowed you to create your own custom chapter master. even if the customizability was somewhat limited. A study of the profile shows that it's identical to that of the Space Marine Captain, and the points cost is the same too. You can also choose one of a series of boosts to customize your Chapter Master to the narrative of your army. Weapon Master gives +1 weapon skill and +1 ballistic skill. Battle Hardened gives +1 toughness. Martial Prowess gives +1 strength and +1 attack. Resilient gives him +1 wound. Strategist gives +1 to his strategy rating. And finally, Swift gives +1 to movement and initiative. The only thing left to do really was to paint the base Goblin green. It's not the original Goblin green, it's Army Painter, but I use it for all my models, so they look uniform. After that, I gave it 2 different dry brushes, one of Citadel Avalanche Sunset, and one more with Vallejo Dark Sand. I painted the backpack off camera, largely using the same techniques as I used on the armour. For instance, the yellow was done exactly the same, and the vents were painted black first and then later with gunmetal. The Imperialis symbol at the top of the banner was painted just like the symbol on his chest. I used Fenrisian grey to highlight the ridges halfway up the banner pole. The backpack banner was sketched freehand on plain paper and coloured in with acrylic paint. It's clearly not as good as one of the original sticky ones, but I'm fairly pleased with it nevertheless. I suppose the only other detail to add is that I painted the eye lenses blue, painted them white first, and using a small amount of Lotham blue and a white dot in one corner. And that's the paint job done. The banner was glued onto the banner pole with a little PVA, and the backpack to the body of the model with superglue. Finally, my Imperial fists have a captain to lead them. But the collection isn't finished yet. I've still got a librarian and chaplain to paint, but rest assured, they will get their own video. As well as painting some Chaos miniatures this year, one of my aims was to paint miniatures that matched the Imperial Fist Supremacy Force released in 1998. It's December now, and the job is close to being done. If I can get it finished before the end of 2024, that'll be great. If not, that's fine, it's just an arbitrary deadline anyway. So I hope you've enjoyed this video, and if you like... Have you heard the news of the Space Marine? An awesome captain with record clean. A crack shot crackier than the crackest shot. Cowardly and pliant he is not. Captain, my captain, a fisty captain. He slaps them chaps with his power fist. Captain, my captain, a fisty lad. He's not the sort of guy you'd want to make mad. He leads the Space Marines wearing yellow, a master strategist, what a fella. Inspiring presence and bolted drill, he'll plant his fist banner on top of that hill. Captain, my captain, a fisty captain, if he's shot you once, he's shot you thrice. Captain, my captain, a fisty boss, he's not the sort of guy you'd want to cross. I said he's not the sort of guy you'd want to cross. And with that, I'd better go paint some more minis. Take care, and thanks for watching.